The sun was setting over New Terra when Jake Morrison's scanner started beeping in a way it had never beeped before. He was 3 hours into his shift, checking the ground for mineral deposits like he did every day. The work was boring, but it paid well, and Jake liked boring. Boring meant safe. Boring meant he could save money and maybe one day move to a better colony, but the scanner was not being boring anymore. Jake stopped walking and looked at the small screen in his hand. The numbers were jumping around like crazy. The device was supposed to find metal and crystals under the ground, but right now it was showing something else. Something that made no sense at all. There was something alive down there. Jake hit the side of the scanner with his palm. Maybe it was broken. He had dropped it last week and the screen had cracked a little. But the beeping continued and the readings stayed the same. According to the device, there was a massive life form buried 700 meters below his feet. That was impossible. Nothing could live that deep. Nothing could survive under all that rock and dirt for any amount of time. Yet the scanner insisted something was down there and it was alive. Jake looked around the empty mining field. The other workers had already gone back to the colony for dinner. He was alone with the red dirt and the dying light. He should report this. He should call his supervisor, Linda Hayes, and let her deal with it. That was the smart thing to do. Instead, Jake knelt down and placed the scanner flat on the ground. He pressed the deep scan button, the one that used more battery but gave more details. The device hummed and beeped for a full minute. Then it showed him something that made his hands shake. The life form was huge, at least 20 meters long. The readings suggested it had a heartbeat, but it was incredibly slow. One beat every 30 minutes. The temperature around it was wrong too. There was heat down there contained in some kind of shell or container. Jake saved the data and stood up. His mind was racing. He had been working on New Terra for 3 years and nobody had ever mentioned anything like this. The colony was built on this planet because surveys said it was empty. Dead. Just rocks and minerals and nothing else. Someone had lied. Or someone had missed something very big. Jake walked back to the colony as the sky turned dark. The main building was made of gray metal and looked ugly against the landscape. But it was home. Inside, people were eating dinner in the cafeteria. The smell of recycled protein and synthetic vegetables filled the air. He found Linda Hayes sitting alone, reading reports on her tablet. She was a tough woman in her 50s with short gray hair and a permanent frown. She did not like surprises and she did not like workers who caused problems. Jake sat down across from her without asking. "What do you want, Morrison?" Linda asked without looking up. "I found something," Jake said. "In Sector 7. My scanner picked up a biological reading." Linda finally looked at him. "Your scanner is broken. I'll order you a new one. It's not broken. I ran the scan 3 times. There's something alive under the ground." Linda set down her tablet. Her frown deepened. "Nothing lives in Sector 7. We surveyed that area for 2 years before we started mining. You're reading geological activity, probably gas pockets or thermal vents." "The signature is biological," Jake insisted. "I saved the data. You can check it yourself." Linda held out her hand. Jake transferred the data to her tablet. She looked at it for a long moment, her face unreadable. Then she deleted it. "Equipment malfunction," she said firmly. "Write a report about the faulty scanner and I'll get you a replacement. Don't mention this to anyone else. The last thing we need is people getting nervous about imaginary monsters under the colony." Jake felt anger rising in his chest. "You didn't even look at it properly." "I looked enough." "Drop it, Morrison. That's an order." Linda stood up and walked away, leaving Jake sitting alone at the table. He clenched his fists. She had not even considered that he might be right. She had just deleted the evidence and told him to forget about it. But Jake could not forget about it. That night, he lay in his small room and stared at the ceiling. The scanner data was still in his personal device. He had made a backup before showing it to Linda. He pulled up the readings again and studied them in the darkness. Whatever was down there had been there for a long time. The geological layers around it suggested it had been buried thousands of years ago. The ground had settled and compressed over centuries, sealing it in deep. Jake thought about the slow heartbeat. 1 beat every 30 minutes. That meant whatever it was barely alive. Just hanging on, waiting for what? He got out of bed and went to his computer. He started searching through the colony's geological database, looking for any mention of anomalies in Sector 7. There was nothing. Every report said the area was stable and empty. But Jake noticed something strange. 5 years ago, before the colony was built, there had been a different survey team. They had spent 6 months on New Terra doing the initial research. Their reports were in the database, but some sections were marked as classified. Jake was just a mining engineer. He did not have access to classified files, but he knew someone who might. Pete Collins was a xenobiologist, which meant he studied alien life. He had been on New Terra for 8 years, longer than almost anyone else. He was also the closest thing Jake had to a friend on this rock. Jake sent Pete a message. Need to talk. Something important. Your lab tomorrow? The reply came 5 minutes later. Sure, bring coffee. Jake smiled for the first time that day. He closed his computer and tried to sleep, but his mind kept returning to that slow, patient heartbeat deep underground. Something was down there, something that had been buried and forgotten, something that had survived when it should have died. And Jake was going to find out what it was, even if it cost him everything. The scanner on his desk beeped softly in the darkness, still detecting that impossible life signature 700 meters below the colony, still insisting that something alive was waiting in the deep, dark earth, still waiting to be found. Pete Collins was waiting in his lab when Jake arrived the next morning. The lab was a mess of equipment, sample containers, and plants from a dozen different worlds. Pete was a thin man with messy brown hair and glasses that were always sliding down his nose. He looked tired, but he always looked tired. You brought coffee, Pete said with relief, taking one of the cups from Jake's hands. You're a good man. Now what's so important that you're messaging me at midnight? Jake closed the door behind him and made sure no one was in the hallway. Then he pulled out his scanner and showed Pete the readings. Pete's eyes went wide behind his glasses. He set down his coffee and took the scanner, studying the screen carefully. Where did you get this? Sector 7. Yesterday evening. Linda deleted the data and told me it was equipment malfunction. Linda Hayes is an idiot, Pete muttered, still staring at the readings. This is not a malfunction. This is incredible. He looked up at Jake. Do you understand what this means? There's a living organism under our colony. Something massive. Something that's been in some kind of stasis for... He checked the geological data. Jake, this thing has been down there for at least 3,000 years. I know, Jake said. That's why I came to you. What kind of creature could survive that long? Pete shook his head. None that I know of. But the universe is big and we've only explored a tiny piece of it. There could be species with biological capabilities we can't imagine. He transferred the data to his computer and started running analysis programs. The cellular activity is minimal but present. Whatever this is, it's not dead. It's dormant. Like hibernation, but on a scale that shouldn't be possible. Jake watched the programs work, displaying graphs and numbers he did not understand. Can you tell what kind of creature it is? Not without a physical sample, Pete said. But I can tell you something interesting. Look at this. He pointed to a particular reading on the screen. That's not just biological tissue. There's something surrounding the organism. Some kind of crystalline structure. It's encasing the entire body. Like a shell? Like a prison, Pete said quietly. Jake, I think something buried this creature on purpose. This wasn't an accident or a natural process. Someone or something put it down there and sealed it in crystal. The room felt suddenly colder. Jake thought about that slow heartbeat. One beat every 30 minutes, continuing for thousands of years in total darkness. Why would anyone do that? I don't know, but I want to find out. Pete's eyes had that excited look he got when he found something interesting. It was the same look that had gotten him into trouble more than once. We need a physical sample. We need to dig. Linda will never approve that, Jake said. She doesn't even believe the readings. Then we don't ask Linda, Pete replied. We do it ourselves. Jake stared at his friend. That's illegal. If we get caught, we'll lose our jobs. They might even send us to prison. Maybe, Pete admitted. But Jake, this is the most important discovery I've ever seen. Maybe the most important discovery anyone has ever seen. Whatever is down there has been waiting for 3,000 years. It deserves better than being forgotten because Linda Hayes doesn't want paperwork. Jake thought about the deleted data. He thought about Linda's dismissive tone. He thought about that patient, waiting heartbeat. Okay, he said. Let's dig. They spent the next week planning. Pete analyzed the geological data and found the best place to excavate. The creature was deep, but there was an old mining tunnel that went down about 400 meters. If they could extend that tunnel another 300 meters, they could reach it. The problem was equipment. They needed drilling machines, excavation tools, and safety gear. They also needed time. The work would take weeks, maybe months, and they could only do it when nobody was watching. Jake solved the equipment problem. As a mining engineer, he had access to all the machinery. He started checking out equipment for routine maintenance and moving it to the abandoned tunnel. Nobody questioned him. Mining equipment always needed maintenance. Pete solved the time problem. He noticed that the security sensors in the old mining section had been offline for months. Nobody had bothered to fix them because that area was considered useless. They could work there at night without being detected, but they needed more help. 2 people could not move that much rock alone. Jake thought about who he could trust. Most of the colonists would report them immediately. But there were a few people who might understand. People who were tired of the colony's rules and lies. Amy Walker was a mechanic who had come to New Terra to escape a bad situation on Earth. She was tough and practical and did not ask too many questions. When Jake told her about the project, she looked at him for a long moment. "You're serious about this," she said finally. "Yes. And you really think there's something alive down there?" "I know there is." Amy nodded slowly. "I'm in. But if we get caught, I'm blaming you." The 4th member of their team was harder to convince. Greg Palmer was a security officer, which meant he was supposed to stop people from doing exactly what they were planning. But Greg was also bored with his job and curious by nature. When Pete showed him the scanner readings, Greg whistled softly. "That's either the biggest discovery in human history or you're all crazy." "Could be both," Jake admitted. Greg laughed. "Fair enough. I'll help you, but on one condition. If this thing turns out to be dangerous, we stop digging immediately. Deal?" "Deal." They started digging the next night. The work was hard and slow. They had to be careful not to make too much noise or cause vibrations that might alert the colony sensors. They worked in 4-hour shifts, using plasma cutters and excavation drones to tunnel through solid rock. After 3 weeks, they had extended the tunnel 200 meters. Jake's hands were covered in blisters and everyone was exhausted. But they kept going. In the 5th week, Pete took samples from the tunnel walls. The analysis showed traces of the same crystalline material from the scanner readings. They were getting close. Another week, Pete estimated. Maybe 2. Then we'll reach it. Jake looked at the dark tunnel stretching ahead of them. Somewhere down there in the deep earth, something was waiting. Something that had been buried alive thousands of years ago. Something that still had a heartbeat. "We're coming," Jake whispered to the darkness. "Just hold on a little longer." The tunnel seemed to whisper back, carrying the sound of 4 humans digging deeper and deeper, searching for a truth that had been hidden for 3,000 years. The breakthrough happened on a Tuesday night, 6 weeks after they had started digging. Jake was operating the plasma cutter when the rock face suddenly gave way. Instead of solid stone, the cutter hit something that glowed with a soft blue light. "Stop!" Pete shouted from behind him. "Stop cutting." Jake pulled back the cutter and stared at what they had uncovered. It was crystal, but unlike any crystal he had ever seen. It glowed from within, pulsing very slowly with light. The pulse matched the heartbeat from the scanner readings. "1 beat every 30 minutes, we found it," Amy whispered. She had dirt on her face and her hands were shaking. "We actually found it." Greg moved forward with a portable scanner, checking for radiation or dangerous gases. "Air quality is stable. No radiation, but there's a lot of energy coming from that crystal. Some kind of power source." Pete was already examining the crystal wall with his instruments. "It's not a natural formation. This was manufactured, engineered. Look at the molecular structure. Every atom is perfectly aligned." He touched the surface gently. "This is technology so advanced it makes our best computers look like stone tools." They spent the next hour carefully clearing away the remaining rock. As they worked, more of the crystal was revealed. It formed a massive chamber at least 50 meters wide, and inside the chamber, suspended in the glowing blue crystal, they saw her. Jake's breath caught in his throat. The creature was enormous, easily 20 meters from head to tail. But she was also beautiful in a way he had not expected. Her body was covered in smooth plates that looked like polished white stone. She had 6 limbs, each ending in delicate claws. Her head was crowned with a series of curved structures that looked like a combination of horns and feathers. 2 large wings were folded against her back, translucent and veined with patterns that reminded Jake of stained glass windows. "She looks like a queen," Amy said softly. Pete was scanning the creature with every instrument he had. The biology is incredible. Insectoid features combined with something else. Something I can't identify. But look at this. He pointed to several dark marks on the creature's body. Those are wounds. Old injuries. They were never treated. Never healed. Jake moved closer to the crystal. Now that he was near it, he could feel a faint vibration in the air, like a sound too low to hear but strong enough to feel in his bones. He looked at the alien's face and saw that her eyes were closed. She looked peaceful, but there was something sad about her expression. Something that spoke of great pain. How long has she been like this? Jake asked. Pete checked his readings. Based on the geological layers and decay rates, I'd say approximately 3,000 years. Give or take a century. 3,000 years, Greg repeated. Buried alive for 3,000 years. That's not execution. That's torture. Look at this, Pete said, pointing to markings on the crystal surface. They were symbols, carved or etched into the glowing material. This is writing. A language. I can't read it, but I can scan it, and maybe the computer can translate. They spent the next 3 days studying the chamber. Pete took thousands of photos and scans. Amy examined the crystal structure, trying to understand how it worked. Greg kept watch, making sure no one from the colony came looking for them. Jake just sat and looked at the alien queen. He could not stop thinking about her being trapped here for thousands of years. Conscious or unconscious? Aware or dreaming? Either way, it was horrible. Someone had put her here on purpose. Someone had decided she deserved this fate. On the 4th day, Pete's computer finished translating some of the symbols. The program could not translate everything, but it got enough to tell them a story. Pete read the translation aloud, his voice shaking. Here lies Vera of the 7 stars, last queen of the Shanari. She refused to surrender. She refused to die. Therefore, she will remain here alive but silent until the universe itself ends. Let all who find this place know the price of defying the Krell. The words hung in the air like a curse. Jake felt sick. This was not a tomb. It was a warning. A monument to cruelty. The Krell, Greg said. I've never heard of them. Neither have I, Pete admitted. But if they did this, I hope they're extinct. Any species capable of this level of cruelty deserves to be forgotten. Amy was running her hands over the crystal surface, her face troubled. There's something else. The crystal isn't just holding her. It's doing something to her. Look at these readings. The crystal is connected to her nervous system somehow. It's keeping her alive, but it's also... She paused, looking for the right words. It's draining her. Very slowly, like it's feeding on her life force. So she's not in suspended animation, Jake said. She's being kept alive while something slowly kills her. Yes, Amy said quietly. And she's probably aware of it. Some level of consciousness has to be active for her body to maintain basic functions. She's been aware of every year, every decade, every century. For 3,000 years, Jake stood up abruptly. He felt rage building in his chest, hot and fierce. We're getting her out. Pete looked at him in alarm. Jake, we don't know what will happen if we break the crystal. It might kill her. It might release something dangerous. We need to study this more carefully. She's been in there for 3,000 years, Jake said, his voice hard. How much more time does she need to wait? How much more suffering is enough? I understand how you feel, but we need to be smart about this. No, Jake said firmly. We need to be human about this. We found someone buried alive and suffering. We don't walk away from that. We don't spend months filing reports and asking permission. We help right now, Greg spoke up. Jake's right. I've seen a lot of bad things in my life, but this is evil. Pure evil. If we walk away now, we're part of it. Amy nodded. I can set up plasma cutters to carefully remove the crystal. It'll take time, but we can do it without causing thermal shock to her body. Pete looked at all of them, then sighed. You're all crazy. But you're right. Let's get her out. They spent the next 2 days preparing. Amy positioned plasma cutters around the crystal chamber, programming them to work in careful sequence. Pete prepared medical equipment, though he had no idea if human medicine would work on alien biology. Greg stood guard, his weapon ready in case something went wrong. Jake just talked to the alien queen. He knew she probably could not hear him, but it felt wrong to work in silence. He told her about Earth, about humans, about how they had found her by accident and decided to help her even though it made no sense. I don't know if you can understand me, he said on the second night, sitting close to the crystal, but we're going to get you out. You've waited long enough. You've suffered enough. It's time to breathe again. The crystal pulsed with its slow, patient light. Inside, the alien queen remained still, trapped in her prison of light and time. But not for much longer. Tomorrow they would begin cutting. Tomorrow they would free her. And tomorrow, Jake thought, the galaxy would change in ways none of them could predict. The plasma cutters hummed to life at exactly midnight. Amy had programmed them to work in a specific pattern, cutting the crystal from the outside in, layer by layer. The process would take hours, but it was the safest way. Jake stood as close as he dared, watching the blue crystal slowly dissolve under the focused heat. Pete monitored the alien queen's vital signs, such as they were. Her heartbeat remained steady at 1 beat every 30 minutes. Her body temperature was stable, but as the crystal melted away, Pete noticed something changing. Her metabolic rate is increasing, Pete said, staring at his scanner. Not much, but it's definitely rising. Her body knows something is happening. Greg checked his weapon for the 3rd time. Is that good or bad? I don't know, Pete admitted. We're in completely unknown territory here. The cutting continued. Slowly, carefully, the crystal prison grew thinner. Jake could see more details of the alien queen now. Her scales were not white as he had thought, but iridescent, shifting between white and pale gold depending on the angle of the light. The wounds on her body were deep scars, evidence of violence that had happened thousands of years ago. After 4 hours, Amy announced that they were ready for the final stage. The last layer is only about 10 centimeters thick. When I cut through it, she's going to be free. Everyone ready? They positioned themselves around the chamber. Pete had medical equipment standing by. Greg had his weapon ready but pointed safely away. Jake just stood near the alien's head waiting. Do it, Jake said. Amy activated the final sequence. The plasma cutters focused on the last layer of crystal, and it began to glow brighter, then brighter still. Suddenly, with a sound like breaking glass, the crystal shattered. The alien queen fell forward, collapsing onto the floor of the chamber. Her body convulsed violently. Her mouth opened and she made a sound, a terrible gasping wheeze that echoed through the tunnel. She's trying to breathe, Pete shouted. Her lungs haven't worked in 3,000 years. She's suffocating. Jake ran forward without thinking. He dropped to his knees beside the alien's massive head and looked into her face. Her eyes were open now. Large compound eyes that glowed with a pale green light. They were filled with confusion and pain. Breathe, Jake said, knowing she could not understand him. Come on, breathe. The alien queen convulsed again. Her claws scraped against the stone floor. Her wings twitched, trying to unfold but too weak to move properly. She was dying right in front of them, drowning in air after being preserved for millennia. Jake remembered something from his first aid training. Sometimes people who had been trapped underwater needed help to restart their breathing. He did not know if it would work on an alien, but he had to try something. He climbed up onto her chest, feeling the hard plates beneath him. He placed his hands over what he hoped was her heart and pushed down, hard. Once, twice, 3 times. Nothing happened. He pushed again, putting all his weight into it. The alien queen's eyes went wide. Her whole body shuddered. And then she took a breath. A huge, gasping, desperate breath that sounded like wind through a canyon. She breathed out, then in again. Out. In. The rhythm was shaky and irregular, but it was working. She was breathing. Pete rushed forward with a medical scanner. Her oxygen levels are rising, heart rate increasing, she's stabilizing. Jake climbed down from the alien's chest and moved back to her head. Her glowing green eyes focused on him. He saw intelligence there and confusion and something that looked like disbelief. Very slowly, the alien queen lifted one claw. It was trembling with effort, but she reached toward Jake. He did not move away. The claw touched his face gently, the sharp tip barely brushing his skin. The moment she touched him, Jake felt something, not physical but mental, a presence in his mind, tentative and weak like someone whispering from far away. He gasped. She's telepathic, Pete breathed. Jake, she's in your head. What is she saying? Jake tried to understand the presence in his mind. It was not words exactly, more like feelings and images. He saw stars, 7 bright stars arranged in a pattern. He saw cities of crystal and metal. He saw beauty and peace. Then he saw fire, darkness, pain, burial, thousands of years of silence and suffering. And he saw one more thing, a question, a single, desperate question that transcended language. Why? Why did you free me? Why did you help? Why would you, a stranger from an unknown species, save someone who had been buried and forgotten? Jake did not know how to send thoughts back to her, so he just spoke aloud, hoping she would understand somehow, because it was wrong. What they did to you was wrong, and humans don't walk away from wrong, not if we can help. The presence in his mind shifted. He felt surprise, wonder, and something that might have been the alien equivalent of tears. The claw withdrew from his face. The alien queen tried to sit up but was too weak. Her body shook with the effort of simply breathing. Pete moved closer with a container of water. Her body is severely dehydrated. 3,000 years, even in stasis, has to have caused damage. He offered the water to the alien carefully. She looked at the container, then at Pete. She understood what it was. One claw reached out and took the container gently, despite its massive size. She brought it to her mouth and drank. The container was empty in seconds. More, Pete said, and Amy ran to get more water from their supplies. Over the next hour, the alien queen drank nearly 50 liters of water. Her body was desperate for it, absorbing it like a desert absorbing rain. As she drank, color returned to her scales. The pale white gold became more vibrant. Her eyes grew brighter. Finally, she stopped drinking and looked at the 4 humans gathered around her. She was still weak, still trembling, but she was alive in a way she had not been since they found her. Jake felt the presence in his mind again. This time it was stronger, more focused. He saw an image of himself and his 3 friends. He felt a wave of gratitude so powerful it almost knocked him over. Then the alien queen did something unexpected. She lowered her head to the ground in front of Jake, a gesture that was clearly a bow, a sign of respect and thanks. "You don't need to do that," Jake said softly. "We just did what was right." The presence in his mind sent back a feeling, a concept that it took Jake a moment to translate into words. Among her people, saving a life created a bond, a debt that could never be repaid, only honored. By freeing her, they had become something important to her. Family, perhaps. Or something even deeper. Pete was scanning her again. "Jake, ask her if she's in pain. I need to know if there are injuries we should treat." Jake looked at the alien queen and tried to project the concept of pain as a question. She understood. He felt her response. Pain, yes. Old wounds that had never healed. But also, something else. The crystal had been connected to her nervous system for 3,000 years. Removing it had caused damage. She could feel parts of her body that did not respond correctly anymore. "She's hurt," Jake translated. "The crystal did something to her nervous system. She needs time to heal." "We need to get her somewhere safe," Greg said. "The colony will notice we're missing soon. When they find this chamber, there are going to be questions. A lot of questions." Amy nodded. "We need to move her, but she's too big to fit through the tunnel." The alien queen made a sound, a soft chirping noise. The presence in Jake's mind showed him an image. Her body could fold, compress. She had evolved to fit through tight spaces when necessary. It would hurt, but she could do it. "She says she can make herself smaller," Jake said. "But we need to move now. She's still very weak." They helped the alien queen stand. She was unsteady, leaning on Jake for support. Her wing-like structures folded tight against her body, and her limbs contracted in ways that looked painful but functional. She was still huge, but small enough to fit through the tunnel. Slowly, carefully, they began the long journey back to the surface. The alien queen that had been buried for 3,000 years was finally breathing again, finally free. But freedom, Jake realized, was just the beginning of their problems. They brought the alien queen to an abandoned storage facility on the edge of the colony. It was old and unused, far enough from the main buildings that no one would hear or see anything unusual. Jake and his team worked through the night to make the space comfortable. They brought water, food supplies, and medical equipment. The alien queen, who Jake now thought of as Vera based on the name from the crystal chamber, was still weak, but growing stronger each hour. She could stand on her own now, though she moved slowly and carefully. Her presence in Jake's mind had grown clearer too. They could not have full conversations yet, but they could share concepts and feelings. Pete spent hours examining her, scanning her biology with every tool he had. What he found amazed him. Her cellular structure is incredible. Every cell contains backup systems, redundancies. Her people evolved to survive almost anything. That's how she lasted 3,000 years. Can you help her heal? Jake asked. Maybe. Some of her injuries are beyond my ability to treat, but I can help with nutrition and basic cellular repair. She needs proteins we don't have, minerals that don't exist on Earth or New Terra, but I can synthesize something close enough to keep her stable. Greg was more worried about security. We can't keep her hidden forever. Eventually someone is going to find out. What do we do then? We tell the truth, Jake said. We found her. We saved her, and we're not giving her up. Amy was examining a piece of the crystal they had brought back from the chamber. This technology is thousands of years beyond ours. If we can understand it, it could change everything. Energy production, medicine, transportation, everything. Vera watched them work, her green eyes following their movements. Jake could feel her curiosity through their mental link. She was learning about them, studying them, trying to understand these strange creatures who had freed her. On the third day, something changed. Jake was sitting with Vera, trying to teach her some basic English words when he felt her presence in his mind grow suddenly stronger. Images flooded his consciousness faster than he could process. He saw her world, a planet with 7 moons and cities that glowed like jewels. He saw her people, the Shanari, millions of them living in harmony. They were scientists, artists, philosophers. They had spread across hundreds of star systems, not as conquerors, but as explorers and teachers. Then he saw the Krell. They came like a plague, a coalition of species united by greed and fear. They saw the Shanari's advanced technology as a threat. They demanded surrender. When Vera refused, they declared war. The war lasted decades. The Krell were ruthless. They did not just fight the Shanari armies. They destroyed entire worlds. Billions died. The Shanari fought back with everything they had, but they were outnumbered and unprepared for such savage brutality. In the end, Vera was the last queen standing. Her fleets were destroyed. Her worlds were burning. The Krell offered her a choice: suicide with honor, or burial alive as a warning to any species that might dare to resist the Krell in the future. Vera chose neither. She fought to the last moment, trying to save her people. When she was finally captured, the Krell did not grant her the mercy of death. They buried her in crystal on this remote world, in a chamber designed to keep her alive and aware for eternity, a monument to their victory and cruelty. Jake opened his eyes, breathing hard. Tears were running down his face. He had felt her pain, her rage, her despair, 3,000 years of it compressed into a few minutes of shared memory. Jake? Pete's voice was concerned. What happened? Jake wiped his eyes. She showed me everything, what they did to her people, what they did to her. He looked at Vera, who was watching him with those ancient, sad eyes. The Krell are monsters. Were monsters, Greg corrected. That was 3,000 years ago. They're probably extinct by now. Vera made a sound, a deep rumble in her chest. Jake felt her disagreement through the link. She did not think the Krell were extinct. Species like that did not just disappear. They survived. They adapted. They waited. Over the next week, Vera grew stronger. She could move freely now, though she was still healing. She started teaching Jake more about her language, using their mental connection to share words and concepts. Jake taught her English in return. Her intelligence was staggering. Within days, she could understand basic conversation. Within 2 weeks, she could speak. Her voice was strange, a combination of chirps and deeper tones that her throat shaped into words. But it was understandable. Why did you save me? She asked Jake one evening. They were alone in the storage facility, the others having gone to get supplies. Jake thought about his answer. Because what they did to you was wrong. Humans have a saying, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I would want someone to save me if I was in your situation. So I saved you. Vera tilted her head. A gesture he had learned meant confusion. But you did not know me. You did not know my species. I could have been dangerous, evil, yet you took that risk. You weren't evil, Jake said. Anyone who survived what you survived and did not go insane has to be strong. Good. The Krell buried you because you scared them. Not because of what you did, but because of what you represented. Hope, resistance, the idea that they could be beaten. Vera was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "My people had a prophecy. In our darkest hour, we believed that someday someone would find us, someone would remember. Your species was not even spacefaring when I was buried. You were primitive, barely using tools. Yet here you are, 3,000 years later, digging me out of the ground. Perhaps the prophecy was about humans all along." "I'm just a mining engineer," Jake said. "Not a hero from a prophecy." "Heroes rarely recognize themselves," Vera replied. "They simply do what they believe is right regardless of cost." Before Jake could respond, his communicator beeped. It was Amy, and she sounded panicked. "Jake, we have a problem. Big problem. Get everyone to the storage facility now." 10 minutes later, they were all gathered. Amy pulled up a display on her tablet, showing a message that had just been broadcast across all colony channels. It was from Linda Hayes, but she was not alone. Several men in military uniforms stood behind her, and their expressions were hard. "Attention all colony personnel." Linda's voice came from the tablet. "We have detected unauthorized excavation in Sector 7 and the removal of a xenobiological specimen. The individuals responsible are Jake Morrison, Pete Collins, Amy Walker, and Greg Palmer. They are to report to Colonial Administration immediately. The specimen they removed is to be surrendered to military authority. This is not negotiable. Failure to comply will result in charges of theft, unauthorized scientific research, and violation of quarantine protocols. You have 12 hours, the message ended. They all looked at each other in silence. How did they find out? Pete asked. "The tunnel," Greg said grimly. "We left tracks, equipment signatures. They must have been monitoring Sector 7 after Jake's initial report." Jake looked at Vera, who was standing very still. He could feel her fear through the link. Not fear of death. She had stopped fearing death 3,000 years ago, but fear of going back, fear of being trapped again, fear of humans being just like the Krell after all. "We're not giving her up," Jake said firmly. "Jake, they have the entire colonial militia," Greg said. "We have 4 people and no weapons. Then we run. Run where?" Amy demanded. "We're on a colony world." "There's nowhere to run to." Jake looked at Vera. "Can your people's technology help us? The crystal chambers, the stuff you showed me. Is there anything that can protect us?" Vera's eyes brightened. She spoke quickly, her new command of English making her words rush together. "Yes, my people had caches, hidden technology stores across the galaxy, emergency supplies in case of defeat. I know where one is here on this world, near where I was buried. I can open it. It requires my genetic signature." "What kind of technology?" Pete asked. "Everything," Vera said. "Weapons, shields, communications that can reach across the stars, medical systems that can heal almost any injury, and ships. Small ones but functional. Can we reach it before the military finds us?" Jake asked. "If we leave now," Vera said. Yes, they looked at each other. Going back to the burial site meant going back to Sector 7, which was certainly being watched. But staying here meant surrender. "Let's go," Jake decided. "We're going to dig until she breathes free." They moved through the colony under cover of darkness, staying away from the main paths and security cameras. Vera had folded her body small again, though Jake could feel through their link how much it hurt her still healing injuries. But she did not complain. She just kept moving forward. Greg led the way, using his security knowledge to avoid patrols. Amy carried a bag of tools they might need. Pete had medical supplies and his scanner. Jake stayed close to Vera, ready to help if she stumbled. They reached the entrance to the old mining tunnel just as the first light of dawn touched the horizon. Behind them, they could hear sirens starting to wail. The colony had discovered they were gone. "They'll seal the tunnel once they figure out where we went," Greg said. "We have maybe 30 minutes. They ran into the darkness, flashlights cutting through the gloom. Vera led the way now, moving faster as they got closer to the burial chamber. Jake could feel her excitement through the link. She was going home in a way, back to something her people had left behind. The chamber looked different in the light of their flashlights. The broken crystal was still scattered across the floor, glowing faintly. But now Vera ignored it and moved to the back wall. She placed one claw against the stone and closed her eyes. For a moment nothing happened. Then the wall began to glow. Patterns appeared in the rock. Intricate designs that had been invisible before. The patterns matched the symbols on Vera's scales, Jake realized. A genetic lock recognizing its creator. The wall split open with a sound like thunder. Beyond it was a corridor made of the same glowing crystal as Vera's prison. But this crystal was different. It was alive with light, welcoming rather than trapping. They walked down the corridor in wonder. The walls showed images as they passed, holographic recordings of Shanari history. Jake saw glimpses of their civilization at its height. Beautiful cities. Happy people. A culture built on knowledge and peace. The corridor opened into a massive chamber. It was filled with technology. Devices of crystal and metal lined the walls, each one softly glowing, waiting. Vera moved among them like she was greeting old friends, touching each one gently. "This is incredible," Pete breathed. This technology could advance human science by centuries. Vera turned to face them. When she spoke, her voice was stronger than they had ever heard it. "This cache was meant for my people's children. For whoever survived to carry on our legacy, but my people are gone, scattered or dead, so now it belongs to those who freed me." She looked directly at Jake. "It belongs to humans. To you." "We can't take this," Jake protested. "It's your heritage." "Heritage means nothing without someone to inherit it," Vera replied. "My people believed in sharing knowledge, in helping others grow. You saved my life when you had no reason to. Now I give you the tools to save yourselves." Amy was already examining one of the devices. "These power cells are incredible. And this looks like some kind of energy shield generator." She looked at Vera. "Can you teach us how to use this?" "Yes, but we must hurry. Your people will find this place soon." Vera began activating the cache systems, explaining each one as she worked. The technology responded to her touch, coming alive after 3,000 years of sleep. She showed them shield generators that could protect against any weapon, medical pods that could heal injuries in hours instead of weeks, communication arrays that could broadcast across the entire galaxy, and in the center of the chamber, covered by a crystal dome, was a ship. It was small, only large enough for perhaps 6 people, but it was beautiful, sleek and organic, looking like it had been grown rather than built. "A scout ship," Vera explained, fast, well-armed for its size. "It can leave this planet and travel between stars." "You want us to run?" Greg asked. "I want you to survive," Vera corrected. "Your colonial government will not let you keep me. They will take me, study me, lock me away, perhaps not in crystal, but in cages and laboratories. I have been imprisoned once. I will not be imprisoned again." Jake felt the determination in her mind. She meant it. She would die before going back to captivity. "But if we run, we can never come home," Amy said quietly. "Where is home?" Vera asked. "Here, on this colony where your leaders will arrest you? Or out there among the stars where you can be free?" Before anyone could answer, an explosion shook the chamber. Dust fell from the ceiling. Through the tunnel behind them, they heard voices shouting. "They found us," Greg said, pulling out his weapon. "They brought explosives." "The shields," Jake said urgently to Vera. "Can you activate them?" Vera moved to one of the wall panels and pressed her claw against it. A barrier of soft blue light appeared across the tunnel entrance, sealing them in but also protecting them from whatever was outside. More explosions came, but the shield held. Through the flickering barrier, Jake could see shapes moving in the tunnel. Colonial militia, heavily armed. And with them, in military uniform, was Linda Hayes. Her voice came through a speaker, amplified and cold. "Jake Morrison, you are under colonial law, subject to arrest. Surrender the alien specimen and yourselves immediately. This is your final warning." Jake looked at his friends. Amy was scared but determined. Pete looked like he wanted to negotiate but knew it was pointless. Greg had his weapon ready, though they all knew he was vastly outgunned. Jake looked at Vera. Through the link, he felt her waiting for his decision. She had given him the tools to escape, but she would follow whatever choice he made. If he wanted to surrender, she would surrender. If he wanted to fight, she would fight. If he wanted to run, she would run. It was his choice, his responsibility. Jake thought about everything that had happened. He thought about finding Vera in the ground, buried alive for 3,000 years. He thought about freeing her, watching her take her first breath in millennia. He thought about the Krell who had done this to her, who had destroyed an entire civilization because they were afraid of peace and progress. He thought about Linda Hayes, who had deleted his evidence without even looking at it properly, who saw Vera not as a person but as a specimen, a thing to be controlled. Jake had been taught all his life to follow rules, to trust authority, to believe that the system would do the right thing if you just gave it a chance. But sometimes the system was wrong. Sometimes authority needed to be challenged. Sometimes the right thing meant breaking every rule you had ever learned. "Start the ship," Jake said to Vera. Pete's eyes went wide. "Jake, if we do this, we're fugitives. We can never go back to Earth, never see our families again." "I know," Jake said, "but I'm not giving her back to people who see her as property. We freed her. That means we protect her, no matter what." Amy nodded slowly. "I'm with you." Greg checked his weapon one more time. "I always wanted to see the galaxy anyway." Pete looked at all of them, then sighed. "You're all insane, but I'm not letting you go alone." He looked at Vera. "How long to start the ship?" 5 minutes, Vera said. She was already moving toward the crystal dome, her claws flying over control panels. "We don't have 5 minutes, Greg said, pointing at the shield. It was flickering. The militia had brought heavier weapons, military-grade plasma cutters that were designed to break through anything. "Then we buy time," Jake said. He activated one of the shield generators Vera had shown them, a portable one the size of a backpack. He put it on and moved toward the failing barrier. "When the ship is ready, get everyone on board. I'll hold them off." "Jake, no," Amy protested. "Someone has to," Jake said. "And I'm the one who started this. I'm the one who dug her out. I'm finishing it." The barrier fell. Colonial militia poured into the chamber, weapons raised. They stopped when they saw Jake standing alone, the portable shield glowing around him. Linda Hayes pushed through the soldiers. "Morrison, stand down. You're only making this worse." "I'm making it right," Jake said calmly. "That alien is a person, a queen. She was buried alive for 3,000 years as punishment for refusing to surrender to genocidal monsters. And you want to put her in a lab. You want to study her like she's some kind of animal. I won't let that happen." "You don't have a choice," Linda said. She nodded to the soldiers. "Take him down." Non-lethal force, the soldiers opened fire. Stunning rounds hit Jake's shield and dissipated harmlessly. But Jake knew the shield would not last forever. Behind him, he could hear the ship powering up, a rising hum that filled the chamber with energy. 30 seconds, Vera's voice called out. The soldiers switched to heavier weapons. The shield flickered under the assault. Jake gritted his teeth and held his ground. 10 seconds, the shield was failing. Jake could feel it giving way. He prepared himself for the impact of stun rounds, hoping they would not kill him. But the impact never came. Instead, he felt Vera's presence in his mind stronger than ever before. He felt her rage at seeing him threatened. He felt her power, held back until now, finally unleashed. The chamber filled with light as Vera roared, a sound that shook the walls and sent soldiers stumbling backward in fear. The light came from Vera herself. Her scales glowed with power, patterns racing across her body like electricity. Her wings unfurled fully for the first time since her awakening, spreading wide and casting shadows across the chamber. She stood between Jake and the soldiers, and despite her injuries, despite 3,000 years of imprisonment, she looked every bit the queen she had once been. The soldiers stopped firing, stunned by the sight. Even Linda Hayes took a step back, her face pale. Vera spoke, and her voice carried power that made the crystal walls resonate. I am Vera of the 7 Stars, last queen of the Shanari Empire. I have endured 3,000 years of torture. I have survived the destruction of my civilization. I have outlasted enemies who buried me alive. She took a step forward and the soldiers retreated. And I will not be caged again. Not by you, not by anyone. Jake felt her presence in his mind, felt her asking a question, not in words but in pure meaning. May I? He understood what she was asking. She wanted to connect with all of them, the way she connected with him, to show them what she had experienced, to make them understand. Yes, Jake said aloud. Vera's eyes blazed brighter. The light from her body pulsed once, twice, and then spread outward like a wave. It touched every person in the chamber. Soldiers, Linda Hayes, everyone. And they saw 3,000 years of darkness. They felt the crushing weight of crystal and stone. They experienced the slow drain of life, the awareness of every passing moment, the endless torture of being alive but unable to move, unable to speak, unable to die. They felt the grief of a civilization destroyed, The rage at injustice, the despair of believing no one would ever come, and then they felt something else. They felt Jake's hand on her chest pushing down, forcing her lungs to work. They felt the first breath of air in millennia. They felt the confusion of rescue, the wonder of kindness from strangers, the hope that perhaps the universe was not entirely cruel. The vision lasted only seconds, but it was enough. When the light faded, several soldiers were on their knees crying. Others stood frozen, their weapons hanging limply in their hands. Linda Hayes was shaking, her face wet with tears. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't understand." Vera folded her wings slowly. "Now you do. Will you still try to cage me?" Linda looked at the soldiers, then back at Vera. She seemed to age 10 years in that moment. "No," she said quietly. "No one deserves what was done to you. No one." She looked at Jake. "Take the ship. Go. I'll tell them you escaped before we could stop you. It will buy you time." "Linda," one of the soldiers protested. "That's an order." Linda snapped, her voice finding its strength again. "These people saved a life that should have died 3,000 years ago. They showed more courage and compassion than our entire government. We're not stopping them." The ship was ready now, humming with power. The crystal dome had retracted, revealing a ramp leading up into the sleek vessel. Amy and Pete were already on board. Greg stood at the entrance, covering their retreat. Jake moved toward the ship but stopped beside Linda. "Thank you," he said. Linda nodded. "Don't thank me. Just survive out there. And Morrison? Make it mean something. What you did here, freeing her. Make sure it matters." Jake climbed aboard the ship with Vera right behind him. The ramp sealed. Through the transparent hull, Jake could see the militia backing away as the ship's engines powered up fully. "Everyone strap in," Vera said, moving to what was clearly the pilot's position. Her claws moved over controls that looked nothing like human technology, but she handled them with the ease of long practice. "This will be rough." The ship lifted off the ground smoothly, then suddenly shot upward like a rocket. The force pressed Jake into his seat. Through the hull he watched the chamber disappear, then the tunnel, then the surface of New Terra. Within seconds they were breaking atmosphere. Alarms began blaring throughout the ship. "The colony has orbital defenses," Greg said, checking a display. "They're powering up to fire." Vera's claws danced across the controls. "These weapons are old by my people's standards, but they can still destroy a ship this size." The ship banked hard, and Jake's stomach lurched. "Hold on." The orbital defense platform fired. Bolts of energy lanced through space, bright enough to leave after images. But Vera was faster. The ship twisted and dove, moving in patterns that seemed impossible for something so large. The weapons fire missed by meters. "She's a good pilot," Greg said, impressed despite the danger. "I commanded fleets," Vera said calmly, sending the ship into a spiral that dodged 3 more shots. "One small ship is easy." They cleared the defense platforms and entered open space. New Terra fell away behind them, growing smaller. Jake looked at the planet where he had lived for 3 years, knowing he would never see it again. "Where do we go now?" Amy asked. "We can't exactly hide. The colonial government will report us. Earth will be looking for us. We're wanted fugitives across human space." "Then we do not stay in human space," Vera said. She brought up a star map on the main display. It showed more systems than Jake had ever seen on any human chart. "The galaxy is vast. There are places even your governments have never explored. Neutral zones, free ports, places where no one asks questions about where you came from." "What about the Krell?" Pete asked. "If they're still out there, they'll be looking for you." Vera was silent for a moment. "Yes, when they learn I am free, they will come. The Krell do not forgive. They do not forget. They will want to finish what they started 3,000 years ago. Then we need to be ready," Jake said. "You have technology, knowledge. Can you teach us to fight?" "I can teach you many things," Vera said. "But first I must do something I should have done long ago." She adjusted the controls and the ship began accelerating toward a different part of space. "I must send a message." "A message to who?" Pete asked. "To everyone." Vera's eyes gleamed with determination. "The Krell buried me to hide their crimes, to make sure no one remembered what they did to my people. For 3,000 years, their version of history has been the only one, but I am alive now, and I will tell the truth." She activated one of the ship's systems. A communication array unfolded from the hull. massive dishes and crystalline structures that began to glow with power. This is a long-range broadcaster, Shanari technology. It can send a signal across the entire galaxy, to every species, every planet with receivers advanced enough to detect it. What are you going to tell them? Jake asked. Everything, Vera said. The truth about the Krell genocide. The truth about the Shanari civilization. Evidence of their crimes. Proof that they are not the peaceful alliance they claim to be. I have records stored in my genetic memory. Images. Testimonies. Data they thought was buried with me. She looked at Jake. Your species has a phrase. The truth will set you free. I was not truly free until I could speak my truth. Now I will speak it to the galaxy. The broadcaster reached full power. Vera closed her eyes and began transmitting. Jake felt her presence in his mind, felt her opening her memories and sending them out into space at the speed of light. The signal carried everything. 3,000 years of injustice, compressed into a data burst that would reach every corner of known space. When she finished, Vera slumped in her seat, exhausted. It is done. Now the galaxy knows. What happens next? Amy asked quietly. I don't know, Vera admitted. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps species who receive the message will ignore it, too afraid of the Krell to act. Perhaps they will not believe an ancient recording from a supposedly dead civilization. She looked at all of them. Or perhaps they will remember that evil only triumphs when good people do nothing. Perhaps they will stand with us. The ship's scanners suddenly lit up with contacts, hundreds of them, appearing all across the sector, ships emerging from faster-than-light travel, their signatures representing dozens of different species. Are those Krell? Greg asked, his hand moving toward the weapon controls. Pete studied the readings. I don't think so. The signatures are all different. Multiple species coming from multiple directions. It's like, he looked at Vera in awe. It's like they heard your message and came immediately. Impossible, Vera said. The message was just sent. It would take hours or days to reach most systems. But the ships kept coming. The communication system lit up with incoming messages in languages both human and alien. Pete filtered through them, translating what he could. This one says they received your transmission. They're from a species called the Talvari. They say the Krell destroyed one of their colony worlds 200 years ago and blamed it on pirates. They've been waiting for proof. This one is from the Huron Collective. They say the Krell have been demanding tribute for decades, threatening war if they refuse. They want to help. This one says, oh my God, it says they're survivors. Shanari survivors, small pockets that escaped the genocide and have been hiding for 3,000 years. They thought they were alone. They thought everyone was dead. Vera's eyes widened. Tears of light ran down her face. My people live? Some of my people still live? The ships continued to appear, forming a fleet around them. Not attacking, not threatening, just gathering, standing together, some responding to Vera's message, others responding to the responses. A chain reaction spreading across the galaxy. The fleet that formed around them was unlike anything Jake had ever imagined. Ships of every size and design representing species from across the galaxy. Some were massive war vessels. Others were small civilian craft that had clearly been pressed into service. But they all had one thing in common. They had all answered Vera's call. The Krell came 3 days later. Their fleet arrived like a dark wave, dozens of ships built for war and intimidation. They were not as large as the gathering that had formed around Vera's ship, but they were professional military vessels. Organized, dangerous. A transmission came through, the voice harsh and threatening. This is Commander Scareth of the Krell Dominion. The criminal known as Vera of the Shanari is under sentence of eternal imprisonment for crimes against the Krell people. Return her to custody immediately, or we will consider all ships present to be in violation of Dominion law. Greg looked at the tactical display. We're outnumbered if it comes to a fight. Their ships are more advanced than most of what's gathered here. But Vera was studying the fleet composition with experienced eyes. The Krell have not fought a real war in 1,000 years. They have grown used to threats and intimidation. Their tactics are outdated. Their commanders are arrogant. She activated the communication system. This is Vera of the 7 Stars speaking to Commander Scareth. I reject your authority. I reject your sentence. And I reject your version of history. Jake felt her presence in his mind, felt her preparing for what came next. He understood what she needed. Connect me to the fleet, he said to Pete. All of them. Every ship that came to help. Pete looked confused but did as asked. You're live across the entire fleet. Hundreds of thousands of people are listening. Jake took a breath. He was just a mining engineer from Earth. He had no experience with speeches or diplomacy, but he had dug until Vera could breathe again, and he was not going to stop now. My name is Jake Morrison. I'm human. 3 weeks ago, I found Vera buried under 700 meters of rock and crystal on a colony world. She had been there for 3,000 years, trapped in a prison designed to keep her alive but unable to move, unable to speak, unable to die. The Krell did that to her, not as punishment for a crime but as a warning, as a monument to their cruelty. He looked at Vera, who was watching him with those glowing green eyes. I'm not a soldier. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who found another living being in pain and decided to help. That's all I did, I helped. And now the Krell are here demanding we undo that, demanding we put her back in her prison, demanding we pretend that 3,000 years of torture was somehow justice. Jake's voice grew stronger. I say no. Humans say no. We don't negotiate with people who bury others alive. We don't compromise with species who commit genocide and call it peacekeeping. We found Vera when she could not breathe. We dug until she could, and we will keep digging, keep fighting, keep standing, until every being in this galaxy can breathe free. The communication channel filled with responses, voices from 100 species agreeing, supporting, declaring their stand. The fleet that had gathered was not military, not organized, but in that moment they were united. Commander Scareth's voice came back filled with rage. You dare lecture the Krell about justice? We brought order to a chaotic galaxy. We made the hard choices that others were too weak to make. And now you shelter our enemy, spread lies about our history, and threaten the peace we have maintained for millennia. Peace built on graves is not peace, Jake replied. It's just slow murder. Scareth cut the transmission. The Krell fleet began moving forward in attack formation. Here they come, Greg said, his hands moving over the weapon controls. All ships are reporting ready. But Jake, most of these vessels are civilian. They won't last long against military weapons. Vera stood from the pilot seat, her full height making her tower over everyone. Then we must make sure they do not need to fight alone. She moved to a different control panel, one that Jake had not seen her use before. The cache on New Terra was small, emergency supplies only. But there are others, larger ones, spread across the galaxy. She entered a sequence into the controls. I am transmitting their locations to the fleet. Energy weapons, shields, medical technology. Everything my people left behind. It is yours now. Use it, survive. Pete's scanner lit up with data. She's sending terabytes of information. Schematics, locations, access codes. This is enough to change the entire balance of power in the galaxy. The fleet began to shift as ships received the data. Those close to cache locations broke formation and jumped away, racing to retrieve the ancient technology. Others began sharing what defensive capabilities they had, forming a protective sphere around Vera's ship. The Krell fleet opened fire. Energy weapons streaked through space, targeting the civilian ships. But the gathered fleet had expected this. They scattered and dodged, using the confusion of numbers to their advantage. Some ships did not make it. Jake watched as vessels exploded or went dark, their life support failing. We need to fight back, Amy said urgently. We can't win a direct fight, Vera replied. But we can do something else. She adjusted the ship's course, heading directly toward the Krell formation. We can show them that fear works both ways. That's suicide. Greg protested, but Jake understood. He felt Vera's plan through their mental link. She's not going to attack. She's going to make them remember. Vera's eyes glowed brighter. She activated every light on the ship, every external sensor, making them as visible as possible. Then she broadcasted on all frequencies, including those only the Krell would hear. I am Vera of the 7 Stars. You buried me once. You failed. You tried to erase my people from history. You failed. You tried to break my spirit over 3,000 years. You failed. The ship accelerated toward the Krell fleet. I am the last queen of the Shanari, and I am still here. Still fighting. Still refusing to surrender. How many more of your enemies can say the same? How many other species have you buried that might someday breathe again? How many monuments to your cruelty are waiting to rise up against you? The Krell fleet hesitated. Jake could see it on the tactical display. Ships that had been advancing suddenly slowed. The formation broke slightly. They're scared, Pete said in disbelief. They're actually scared. A new voice came over the communications. Not Scareth, but someone else, older, calmer. This is Elder Commander Vareth of the Krell Dominion. Commander Scareth has been relieved. I am authorized to negotiate. Vera slowed the ship. I do not negotiate with those who believe they have authority over my life. Then let me speak plainly, Vareth said. The Krell Dominion has existed for 6,000 years. We have survived by being strong, by being feared, by doing what others would not do. But I am old enough to remember the Shanari. I was there when we buried you, and I have lived 3,000 years knowing what we did. There was a long pause. I cannot give you justice. I cannot undo what was done. But I can give you truth. The Krell did not bury you because you were dangerous. We buried you because you were right. Your people offered peace and we chose war. You offered knowledge and we chose fear. We destroyed the greatest civilization the galaxy had ever seen because we were terrified of what you represented. The possibility that strength and compassion could coexist. That power could be used for creation rather than domination. Scareth's voice broke through, angry. Vareth, you are betraying the Dominion. No, Vareth replied. I am saving it. The Shanari Queen has shown the galaxy what we did. The truth is spreading faster than we can stop it. We have two choices. Fight a war against every species that now knows our crimes, or admit what we have done and try to earn forgiveness we do not deserve. The Krell fleet began to withdraw. Slowly, deliberately. Not all ships followed. Some continued to advance, Scareth's voice screaming orders, but most pulled back, acknowledging Vareth's authority. We are leaving, Vareth said. But Vera of the Seven Stars know this. There are others in the Dominion like Scareth, those who believe the old ways were correct. They will come for you again. Not today, perhaps not tomorrow, but someday. Let them come, Vera said calmly. I have waited 3,000 years. I can wait longer, and I will not wait alone. The Krell fleet jumped away, leaving only debris and silence behind. The gathered fleet erupted in celebration, ships broadcasting messages of victory and unity. But Vera was not celebrating. She looked at Jake, and he felt exhaustion in her mini.